Yeah, so we got episode 7. How's it going, everyone? My name is Gage Ryan, and we're here with episode 7 of Contender. So, I'm here to talk to you guys for the next 40 minutes or so about the great sport that is mixed martial arts. So, we've got a pretty packed show for you today. Well, that's the intro. Let's get into it. So, the first thing I got to talk to you guys about is the level that exists outside of the UFC. And I think it was put on display in the Eddie Alvarez fight for a one championship, because you have a very good case like where this guy comes in. He's been a long-standing champion of Bellator, and he's been this big figure outside of the UFC. Maybe not to the same extent as someone like, let's say, Fedor, but he's a guy that people recognize. They see what a big name he is, and they're wondering, okay, well, when is he going to go to the UFC now? And finally, he got his shot. He goes into the UFC. He becomes the UFC lightweight champion. He loses to Conor in a pretty one-sided fight. Sorry, I'm playing with this gain back here on my microphone. I don't know what is going on with my microphone lately, but it's been giving me some issues. So let's go ahead and turn that down, see how that is. So anyways, you had him on display. You had a very long-standing, independent, non-UFC related career, much like, let's say, someone like Ben Askren before he did join the UFC. So Eddie Alvarez, he goes into the UFC, wins the world title, and then he fights Conor, he loses to Conor, and he has a couple back and forth fights with mixed results, and then he just decided it was time to move on, and so then he goes to ONE FC. He fights his first fight in ONE FC, he loses, and it's a case where, okay, Eddie's still a legend. He's still a warrior, man. He is just one of the best that has ever done it, for sure. He's also a guy that has shown a couple weaknesses throughout the course of his career, and I think those were capitalized on. I think that's just how it goes in this game sometimes. And I don't think it's going to hurt his legacy one bit. He could lose probably his next 5 fights in a row. It wouldn't hurt his legacy. He's I think kind of a Dan Henderson almost like figure when you think about it, where they're both just tough dudes that just want to scrap. You know what I mean? So I think it's an interesting spot that Alvarez is in. I think that he's in that spot where he was 29-4, I think, at one point, which is just a completely mind-boggling record. Like outside of maybe Ben Askren being undefeated, and Khabib Nurmagomedov being undefeated, there really isn't, I don't think, a more impressive record. Well, you have John Jones, but he's been on steroids for how long? So, it's crazy. And Justin Gaethje's another guy, and Justin Gaethje was put into a pretty tough spot also, where he comes in, he's 18-0, I believe. He wins his first fight in a crazy fucking war with Michael Johnson. Then he goes up, I forget who he fights next, but then he loses his next 2 in a row, and he's put in a position where essentially he has to look at himself and say, am I really as good as I think I am? And really, nobody knew. Like, they didn't, like, people were starting to count him out. They were starting to say, okay, well, it's pretty clear that he's pretty good, but he's not world class. And then he goes out there and he just has a barn burner of a fight with Barboza and beats him down. It was crazy to watch. It was just a crazy war. And that should be like a consideration for Fight of the Year. And I think that proved a lot of what people have been saying, that Justin Gaethje is absolutely for real. And maybe not for real, because we already knew that. But he was a guy that, like, okay, he's good. Is he great? And I think he showed in that fight that he is indeed great. So I wonder, does he get the belt? He's definitely going to get a shot at it. The question is, maybe not in his next fight, but pretty soon he'll get a shot at it. Especially if he puts together another impressive win like that. The question is, does he get the belt? And I'm not sure. Like, cause I've counted him out before, and I don't want to run the risk of doing it again. But it's another case where. Sorry about that. But it's another case where, okay, I don't know if I want to take the risk of counting you out again, because I did so many times before, and each time I was proven wrong. It was almost kind of like Conor McGregor's rise when you think about it, because you had Conor McGregor, who was just this. He comes in and he just has a whirlwind of hype behind him. He's got a decent record. 12-2 is nothing to sneeze at. But is he that good? He fights Marcus Brimage in his first fight. Beats down Marcus Brimage. I mean, just completely outclasses him, lands strikes from every which way, and just finishes the fight in like a minute. And no disrespect to Marcus Brimage, but it was a world class performance from Conor. Maybe not world class, but it was a very impressive debut. So then he fights, I believe, was his next fight Max Holloway. Regardless, then you go to Dennis Seaver, I believe, and Dennis Seaver just put up no fight whatsoever against Conor McGregor. Conor just made him look defenseless in there. I mean, he, again, carved him up, and that's nothing. Like, that is a huge victory for someone like Dennis Seaver, who's a veteran of the sport, who knows the game real well. And I mean, he just made him look powerless. And then you go against what was it, Diego Brandao? I think I missed up the order on that, but again, takes Diego Brandao out in the first round, and in his home country, which was pretty cool to see, because I mean that was one of the biggest crowds, like one of the biggest crowd ovations I'd ever seen, and it's at that point where you're like, okay, there's something going on here, like this guy is for real, and then he goes in against Dustin Poirier. And people are like, okay, well, he's probably not going to beat Dustin Poirier. Dustin Poirier is probably going to get to him, or he'll outlast him because of his great cardio, this, that, and what does he do? He knocks him out in the first round. And I mean, it was a case where Poirier was so pissed off at him because Conor talked so much shit throughout the fucking build up to that fight. It was so fun to watch, and he just got consumed by it. He just did not show up for that fight, and Conor again just made him look like an amateur. Conor, what he does better than anybody outside of maybe Chael Sonnen is he gets you to fight angry. I mean, really the only person that ever withstood it outside of Nate Diaz, but I mean that's just because Nate doesn't give a fuck. But outside of that, really the only person who ever was able to fight through that, like without compromising their style or doing something they wouldn't normally do, was Khabib Nurmagomedov. And I mean, when you have a crazy, crazy upbringing like Khabib did in Russia, where he essentially just grew up, where he was born and raised essentially in just like military style, like prison workouts. I mean, there's that viral video, of course, of him wrestling with a fucking bear, and in reality, it's not nearly as bad as it sounds. It sounds way worse than it looks. Because, I mean, in reality, it's cute to watch, but it's just the kind of Meanwhile in Russia shit that you would see on Facebook and whatnot, and it's just so funny. But, I mean, outside of things like that, like, he became a grappling just phenom, where just he gets his hands on you and he is just going to beat you down. He's like Ben Askren, only, like, more vicious, because really, like, you hear Khabib's ground and pound land, and it sounds like you're taking a racket to a wet blanket or something. It's just like you hear the thud and thud and thud every time he hits you, and it's just like, Jesus Christ, like, what? I've never seen anything like this. And then, you see that the fight really, in my mind, that made Khabib, the fight that really got Khabib on the map, was his performance against Michael Johnson, where Khabib just went out there. He took a couple good shots from Michael Johnson, but then Khabib just pressed forward, eventually got his hands on him, threw him on the ground, and just for 3 rounds just beat him down. You just see like some of the most rugged and vicious ground and pound I've ever seen in my life. It wasn't necessarily a bloody show, but it was just, again, like you hear every single shot that lands. And, like, John McCarthy warned Mike multiple times, like, you got to start moving or I'm going to stop this fight, because he just got beat on. And Michael Johnson had incredible heart, incredible courage in that fight, but, man, he just looked powerless. And that's what Khabib's done to everyone. Even the fight where everybody says, oh, Khabib looked like there were weaknesses, was the Al Iaquinta fight. And, I mean, it's nothing against Al Iaquinta, because Al Iaquinta is obviously a world-class fighter. I think the fight that actually made Al Iaquinta was his fight with Khabib Nurmagomedov, and then to have another fight that makes you directly after against Kevin Lee, that was big for Al Iaquinta. Now he is a major player, and the thing is, like, you just have certain fights that have this hype about them that, if you win, and if you win in especially if you win in like spectacular fashion, you are instantly a contender. and we see that over and over again. You have Conor. I think his was he had those like building up and up and up. He never fought downwards. He was always aiming up. If he was ranked 15, he was looking to fight the number 11th guy, and then the number 9th guy, and then the number 7 guy. Like, he was always going, he was always climbing higher and higher. And then Conor did that better than anybody, is that he picked his spots really well. And I think to a smaller extent you saw that with Chael. But, I mean, Chael was more like a come one, come all, I'll fight everybody. Whereas Conor, like, picked his spots. And I think that's why you saw Conor, he got the bigger fight and bigger fight and bigger fight every time, because he was just the best at selling them. And, of course, that makes a lot of people, that unsettles a lot of people, and it's like, well, it should just be about, your skills and, just where your rankings are and blah, blah, blah. It's like, yeah, okay, that's true. But essentially, when you have a dude that he's bringing in record money and he's knocking everybody out, like, when he's backing up his words every single step of the way, like, you have zero reason to not go with the guy. I think people give Conor a lot of unnecessary shit. Like, is he the best in the world? Probably not. But is he one of the best in the world? Absolutely. And if you don't think so, I don't know what to tell you. He is a world-class striker, for one. His clinch work is actually a lot better than people give credit. You saw that, I think, in the Max Holloway fight. You obviously saw that in the Nate Diaz fight, or the second Nate Diaz fight in particular. You saw how good his clinch game can be. And you see a guy that if you're standing in one way or another, he's going to be able to hit you. And I mean, you see how good he is at managing distance and managing range and knowing how to, like, he does what a fencer would do, in that if you throw a punch, if you throw a kick, he knows how to step back, just to the inch, just enough. And then his ability to cover distance is very deceiving. Like, he's able to to dart in and out of position at a very fast, with just one or two movements. And because he's so efficient, he's not, moving his entire body into these things. He's just taking, certain muscles in his legs and making one or two movements with them and stopping. And what he does is, that he darts in and out of position, and he also knows where the angle is at. He also capitalizes specifically on very awkward angles that his opponent doesn't see coming. And that's what especially you saw in the Dennis Siver fight. And also he's so unorthodox, and he throws so many weird spinning kicks and, jump turning side kicks and just all sorts of crazy unorthodox shit. And sometimes he lands it. He's throwing flying knees in fights. He's throwing spinning back kicks in fights, which isn't a super unorthodox technique. But when you're the hand plant spinning back kick, that's pretty crazy. And he lands it sometimes too. He threw that multiple times against Dennis Siver. I think he hit him with it once. And just his ability to keep a pace, walk his opponent down, when you're backing up and he just continues to land shots on you while he's very efficient and able to not be hit and to hit his opponent. And when you got the kind of power that he has, it's real tough for a lot of people to answer. But obviously you got what his weaknesses are. His weaknesses are, if you push a pace on him that he's uncomfortable with, he tends to fade. And you see that in the Floyd Mayweather fight. You see that in the Khabib Nurmagomedov fight. You saw that in the first Nate Diaz fight. You saw that in the second Nate Diaz fight. If you're able to weather Conor's storm, he has a lot of trouble. And what I think that really just boils down to cardio. If Conor was able to do what Conor does for 5 rounds, he would probably still be the world champion, in all honesty. When you have it, and he probably would have beat the brakes off of Nate Diaz in both fights, because let's be honest, the only thing that Nate Diaz has over Conor is, he has the ground game for sure, but all he has is cardio. Anytime it's on the feet, Conor makes Nate look like an amateur, unless he gets tired. You saw that in the first fight. He was just carving Nate up for the majority of the first round. He gets tired, and all of a sudden Nate starts landing shots, and he starts pushing the pace, and then he folds. If Conor could do what he does for 5 rounds, he'd probably still be the world champion. You saw that Khabib was starting to get a little bit tired in the 4th round, and so as such, he just shot in pretty much immediately for a takedown, eventually got the takedown, and choked Conor, because I think he was realizing that he was fading, so I think he was trying to end it quickly. I think if Conor could have gotten up from that, he was still as fresh as he could have been, like let's say in round 2, for instance, because you'll be tired by round 4, obviously, but if he kept good cardio and he worked harder with that, I think that he could have gotten up from that 4th round position, potentially. Gotten up and then landed a big knockout shot. I think it's entirely possible. Now, obviously we'll never know, and we'll never know even if there's a rematch what would have happened on that night, because it was just different circumstances, and you saw that Conor's timing just kind of was off. You know, that was another big thing is that John Kavanagh talked about, is that we were too defensive of a mindset, and they were kind of going in there not to lose, but not to win. And I think that you saw that. I think that Conor, his timing was just off, his reads were a little bit off, and he was very inefficient with his energy. I think that he was rushing. I mean, like he was rushing forward. He was throwing these techniques. You could tell we're just kind of trying to gauge the distance, but I don't think that he paid enough respect to Khabib's striking. He gets hit that one time, and then all of a sudden now he's got to worry about both, and now his energy's getting zapped because he's getting taken down. And now his energy's zapped, and well, that's the fight right there. Like, you essentially, you make that one mistake, Khabib capitalizes on it, he zaps your energy in that round, and then you're pretty much done from there. So, it's real tough for someone like Conor, who just doesn't have a great gas tank. I think if he's ever going to beat Khabib, I think that's what he needs to do. And I think if you're Khabib, you just need to keep doing what you're doing. You got to find better ways to shoot in open space, or to at least close the distance. You see that Khabib is not really that great at shooting in open space. You know, that he kind of just tends to dive for his opponent's legs, and especially if they back up, or if they, God forbid, they even turn a little bit of a corner to him, that he'll just dive for the for the inside of or for the outside of the leg. And I feel like he needs to have a better way of doing that, because I feel like he could get set up to get flying kneed. You saw that almost happen in the Conor McGregor fight, or Khabib, where pretty much right off the bat, like within the first 20 seconds or so, Khabib, like, he goes over to the side trying not to get trapped by Conor, and he shoots in open space, and Khabib almost knees him in the. I think he actually does knee him in the head, but it just didn't. Like, I think maybe his arm was in the way. I don't remember, but that was like a crucial knee. Like, if he had landed that clean, that could have knocked Khabib out right there, and that would have been the fight. So, like, just imagine if that was a big, like, flash, like, highlight reel knockout, like Michael Venom Page versus, I forget the guy's name, but where he just threw that massive flying knee, and he just had that giant, like, caved-in spot on his head. It was fucking gnarly. But just imagine if it was something like that, and this entire time, like, Conor was able to be the one that beats Khabib Nurmagomedov. Like, it just would have been a crazy situation. And, you know, who's to say that doesn't happen in the rematch? I think that Conor and Khabib, I mean, they're the way I describe it is that they're kind of like the Batman and Joker. Like, they hate each other, but they need each other in this weird way. Like, they're natural. For every good guy, you have to have a bad guy to fight against. Otherwise, like, if the good guy's just sitting there all by himself, like, you know, it's not really the most compelling story. That's why John Cena got turned on halfway through his career. But it's interesting to watch these two, because they're going so personally with their storylines, and they're, well, not storylines. That's how I look at these things. I guess maybe it wasn't the best way to say it. I'm a big pro wrestling fan too, but the way that they're going, like, I mean, Conor, let's be real, he's trying to get attention, he's trying to get headlines, he's trying to hype people up for the rematch, he's trying to get in Khabib's head right off the bat, trying to get him to fight more emotionally than he did the first time, because he knows if he gets that emotional, if Khabib gets emotional and engages in a way that he shouldn't, Conor's going to knock his ass out. And he'll do it 10 out of 10 times. You know, if you engage with Conor the wrong way, or you leave your chin exposed, and Conor is, let's say, the Conor who fought Dustin Poirier, or the one that fought Aldo, or the one that fought Alvarez, you're going to get knocked out 10 out of 10 times. So, I think that Conor, what he's trying to do, I think his big thing that he realizes that it's real tough to get in a Russian's head, but if Conor thinks he's up for the task, and he got in Khabib's head, but the thing is, Khabib did not fight emotionally, and that's a big, big, big talking point. he didn't fight emotionally. He never fought emotionally in that fight. I mean, like, he was taunting him in between rounds and all that, but he wasn't, like, screaming at him in between rounds or trying to swing for the fences or anything like that, because that's what Jose Aldo did. And you saw how well that worked for Aldo and how well it's worked for him since. You know, it's crazy. And I want to see what happens if they rematch, because I think if Conor, if he gets his training right, where he's doing just enough takedown defense and clinch defense, and he's able to keep it on the feet, but also be a samurai sword sharp as he usually is with timing, I'm interested to see if Khabib could beat him. Because I think Conor, going into the rematch, because there will be a rematch, the idea that could Khabib get the takedown without Conor landing that left hand on his chin? Because that was not Conor at 100%. And that's just the fact of it. I'm a huge Conor fan. I'm a huge Khabib fan. I probably like Khabib more than Conor, to be honest. But it's also just the fact that Conor is the perfect opponent to beat Khabib. Now, Conor thinks he can beat Khabib. Khabib knows he can beat Conor. And Conor, even with all the cheating and the grabbing the tights and all that, or grabbing the tight, well, that might have been part of it, actually. Grabbing the trunks or grabbing the glove and holding the cage and it just all sorts of shit. Even with all that, Khabib still beat his ass. So that's also maybe, let's say, not the best talking point for Conor. You know, I don't know what was up with all the cheating. I lost some respect for Conor after I saw all that shit. And I mean, I understand it happens sometimes just by accident, but you don't do it like seven different things on accident. I don't know, man. But I don't know. I don't know who wins the rematch. You know, I was pretty confident that Khabib was going to win the first one. I'm not confident about the second one. And it's entirely possible that Khabib just goes out there and beats the shit out of him like he did in the first fight. But it's also entirely possible that in the first 15 seconds, Conor lands that left hand, and all of a sudden, he's the new champion. And I think it'd be interesting if let's say they went to a rubber match. If Conor wins the second one by knockout, all of a sudden Khabib is undefeated, or Khabib is no longer undefeated, and Conor gives him a rematch. So they go to the rubber match, and all of a sudden, this is... how is Khabib going to respond to the adversity? He lost for the first time ever in his career. You know, will he recover psychologically? You know, will he ever be that same Khabib? Will he be able to benefit from understanding, like, okay, I got to move my head this way so I don't get knocked out again? You know, can he learn from his mistakes? I think it's a real interesting storyline if Conor could possibly get the W in the second fight. And Conor Khabib 3 would hands down be the biggest pay-per-view that the UFC's ever done, and there would be nothing close. I wonder... I don't know. I wonder who wins that rematch. And I think that Conor has a real possibility, especially from someone like Conor, who is very good at going back to the drawing board, learning from his mistakes, and trying again. You know, you have this guy where he does it right the first time, you know, quite a few times, but he almost always gets it. Actually, I think every single time he's gotten it right on the second try. So, I wonder if Khabib can withstand what he brings to the rematch, because it's always something new. And to transition from someone who needs quite a bit of talking points about him, Israel Adesanya. And man, I think Israel Adesanya, he recently had a fight that is at least in a way, in partially has made him, I should say. And that was Israel Adesanya and Anderson Silva. You know, Israel went out there, he won all 3 rounds, he outstruck Anderson Silva. And Anderson Silva, it's not like he was out of the fight at any point. Anderson went out there, he did all his typical shit that he won championship. Well, he won the championship with and beat countless individuals with, throwing his hands around, doing the fake out shit, throwing from weird angles, throwing some crazy shit we haven't seen before, throwing the elbow up. Actually, I think that might have been against Bisping, but you get the idea. You have all this old Anderson Silva shtick, and you see Israel Adesanya just calmly, just dodging out of the way of those things. No, you're not gonna fool me with that. Oh, I know you were gonna try that, and Israel showed just how seriously he takes studying his opponents. And I think when you have a guy who's as dangerous of a striker as Israel is, mixed with that with that ability to break down his opponents, I think you have something really scary in the works. I think you definitely see a potential Israel Adesanya versus Robert Whittaker fight. And I'm gonna love every second of that fight, man. You'll get no argument from me because you have two of the best strikers in the middleweight in the UFC. Like, they're probably the number two, or the number one and number two strikers in the UFC. If Conor McGregor isn't there, you have just excellent timing, great precision, great speed. Maybe Robert Whittaker isn't the fastest guy, but he's also very good with timing. And you also see that with Max Holloway. Max Holloway, his punching speed and his punching power are not really all that high, to be completely honest. They're not bad, but they're not super duper high. They're not Conor McGregor level, we'll say. They're not knocking people out in one shot. These guys are just some of the best in the world at timing and precision and knowing exactly when to throw a strike and exactly how far back to move. And you saw like that in the Max Holloway and Brian Ortega fight, which was an excellent fight, man. But you saw Max, he was just throwing these punches. They weren't fast and they weren't super powerful, but they were landing so often. And it was just because Max knew just how far back to slide to avoid getting hit. And then he knew exactly when to time it to throw the retaliation, if you will. And it was very interesting to watch because you could make arguments that like this round was scored this way or this round was scored that way, and that kind of leads me to another thing I want to talk about, which is the 10-point must system. And I don't know about you guys, but I hate it. And I like the fighters that have the bragging rights about I've never lost a round. That's always fun to hear about, and usually it's true. I mean, you have guys like Khabib, who on official scorecards he lost one round to Conor McGregor. I don't think he lost the round, but whatever. So Khabib's like, yeah, I've never even lost a round, let alone a fight. Chael Sonnen, who's lost like 3 rounds his whole career. No, I'm just kidding. He's never lost a round. He's never lost a fight. Obviously, I mean, you see him right there beating Anderson Silva for the world championship. That's my background picture because it's my favorite fight of all time. But you see him winning the world championship against Anderson before he beat Anderson a second time for it. Yeah, you get the whole story. You know what I mean. But I think the 10-point must system should be more sensitive. Because, one, I think it leads to more diversity in the scorecards. And I also think that, like, really, you have 10-9 and 10-8. That's literally it. You don't have a single other thing that ever really happens, unless you have someone like Cecil Peoples judging or something like that. But with rational judges that actually know what they're doing, you would have you would have like the same scorecards. They're all 30-27, or this one's 29-28. Like, they're all the same. And I think that knockdown, I think it should be more like the way it is in boxing, where, let's say if this guy's just getting outstruck the entire first round, like this guy, Conor and no, we're not going to do that. We'll just say Guy A and Guy B. And Guy A is just hitting Guy B the whole time, and B is just completely missing A the entire time, but he's not getting knocked down. I still would qualify that as a 10-8 round, just specifically based on the stats, and I don't think a lot of judges would. You would still see just a 30-27 across the board. And I think that let's say you knock a guy down one time, it's a 10-8 round. You knock a guy down twice, it's a 10-7 round. You knock a guy down 3 times, a 10-7. I feel like it should be more wide, just a wider range or a wider sensitivity as to how you're judging points, because that's basically how they do it in boxing. And I feel like when you have more different. I also think that when you have judges that are judging more about the fight as a whole than you are round by round, it also leads to vastly different judging. And I don't know if a lot of fighters and a lot of fans would want that necessarily. I know some of them would, but when you have fighters that are trying to outpoint their opponent rather than going for the finish, which doesn't bother me. You're there to win the fight. You're there to get your hand raised, and you're there to get a paycheck and get the fuck out of there. So if I can take no damage and I can, someone like Dominic Cruz is like, yeah, I'm not hitting you super hard, but you're not hitting me at all. And that's a smart way to do it. That's the way Floyd Mayweather does it. That's the way that so many smart long-term fighters have done it. And I think that also affects judging, because I think there's a lot of people out there there's people out there that think that TJ Dillashaw, for instance, beat Dominic Cruz. Now, I'm not in that boat. I think that it was a relatively clear 3-2 decision. I think Dom won the first 3 and TJ won the last 2. But, there's a lot of people, he clearly lost the first round. It's like, no, not really. I mean, I feel like the rounds were pretty self-explanatory as just to how they scored them, but at the same token, I was the one that was pushing the pace, but it's like, yeah, but you were missing every single time. And I was the one that landed the bigger shots. It's like, yeah, but you only landed 3 of them the whole fight. So there's different ways that people score it. And I feel like there should be a more unanimous way that everybody could agree on the scoring system. I feel like that needs to be called into question a bit. And I feel like if you had this scoring that's a little more sensitive, I feel like that might serve that purpose. I think that if it was a simple rule, okay, you get knocked down, it's a 10-8 round. If it was just something simple like that, I understand there'd be controversies of he tripped more than a knockdown, but I think those can be called on a case-by-case basis. The ref can rule that was not a knockdown or something like that. And I think that would help, because you're like, okay, well, at least we understand that, whether I agree with it or not, at least we understand, okay, if you get knocked down, that's 1 point. So, I feel like that would help out. But I have no idea. I'd like to get some feedback. But I'm not totally sure. So, that's another big thing, man. And it's just, I guess I'll close this out with talking about Daniel Cormier and Brock Lesnar. Honestly, I'm so over it. I don't want to see it. It doesn't interest me pretty much at all. I mean, I think we all know that unless DC slips on a banana peel, that he's gonna beat the shit out of Brock Lesnar. Brock Lesnar has no sensible chance of winning this fight. Now, could Brock theoretically maybe just throw a big ass overhand right and crack DC and knock him out? It's possible, yes. If that, watch, that'll be what happens, because I'm talking about how DC should win this fight, now he's gonna win this fight, and then watch, he'll lose. But, it's a case where, Brock, he's got power for sure. You saw that in the Heath Herring fight, where he just, throws that big, right hand and just, knocks Heath Herring. He goes flying backwards and does a fucking backwards somersault. It was so funny to watch, but especially because he didn't respect Brock's punching power, and he didn't respect Brock's striking, and so naturally, he gets cracked in the head. But honestly, there's no real legitimate chance. Brock has maybe a 1 in 10 chance of winning the fight, and that's kind of being generous. So I think you see DC, you see him go out there and you see him dominate, and it's a big payday fight, and he even admits that, and that's fine. But I hope it's not the last time we see DC. I think leaving fans with that fight is just unfortunate. In my mind, he fights Stipe again, and he fights Jones. But I mean, also in my ideal world, Jones would be drug tested around the clock, and if any frickin' picograms came out, he'd be banned for life. But that's not the world we live in, because money. So. I mean, DC, I don't, at the same time, I go back and forth with the Stipe rematch, because it's sort of like Conor McGregor, Jose Aldo. At the same, it's okay, well, dude, I just knocked him out in the first round. What more do you want from me? And I don't want to hear anybody friggin' talking about eye pokes. They happen accidentally all the friggin' time. And don't even try comparing him to someone like Jones, who's made a friggin' career out of it, until recently. Anyway. I wonder if that's the reason why they're not doing it, is because, like, okay, well, dude, I knocked him out in the first round. Like, I can't, there's a good chance I can't top that. Like, what more do you want from me? So, like, maybe give him Brock first, and then, like, give him Jones in his retirement fight or something like that. Yeah, that would be interesting. I would like to see how that would go. But honestly, like I said, I'd be monitoring John Jones, like, with every drug test under the sun. And, of course, they would find picograms, and then I would ban him for life, and, that's that. But DC, man, it sucks that he's retiring soon, man, because I'm such a big fan of his. And he's a guy who is freaking fun to watch, who is fun to listen to. He's got a lot of good knowledge. He knows a lot about the game. And I hope he's a head coach of an MMA team one day. And I don't know if he ever will be. I mean, he kind of already is with AKA. Like, he's probably going to be Cain Velasquez's head coach. Or if he's not already. I know that they were talking about it. I'm not totally sure. But I think you give DC, like, pretty much, like, he names his price at this point. I mean, he's a guy who's done everything. And the only thing I think that he would want would be another fight with Jones and the Brock Lesnar fight. And at this point, you give him what he wants, man. Because Daniel Cormier is one of the greatest of all time. And if he wants to fight, Brock Lesnar 3 more times in a row, yeah, let the man have his due. He's Daniel Cormier. Now, I don't think he would want Brock Lesnar 3 times in a row, but it would be just the same result pretty much every time. Or not pretty much every time, it'd be it every time. So I look at DC and where he's at, man, and if he's not in your top 5, I don't know what your top 5 includes, but it's probably wrong. Just when you have a guy like DC who is the light heavyweight champion, the heavyweight champion, the Strikeforce champion, the King of the Cage champion also? Like, who was dominant everywhere he went, who the only guy he ever lost to is a notorious steroid user. Like, if he's not the greatest of all time, he's certainly, like, top 3. So, I wonder what he does. I wonder if he goes into coaching more. I wonder if he stays as an analyst more, kind of like Bisping nowadays and all that. And that's an awesome role that I love seeing fighters get into. It's like they're making their way for whenever they retire, and it's awesome. And it gives fighters an easy job, and not an easy job by any stretch, but it gives them a job that they enjoy doing. That also gives them a good amount of change in their pocket, and it's a good transition for them and all that. But I wonder what he does. I also wonder what Stipe is going to do. I wonder if he comes back and fights a couple more times, if he fights once or twice and that's it. I don't know, and I'd like to see what he does. And I'd love to see him come back and try another run, but I don't necessarily know if he will. I guess we'll have to wait and see, because I still want to see the Stipe and Cain fight. That fight just needs to happen. And at this point, what's funny is I bring Stipe back. You know who I give him at this point? I give him Francis Ngannou. I throw him in there with Ngannou again. Ngannou's been on a tear. Stipe's coming back. It's a great fight for him. It's a great fight for Ngannou. And if Ngannou knocks him out in the first round, I think it's eventually you go to the rubber match. Let's say a little later down the line. I'd love to see that. I'd love to see Francis fight someone like Alistair again, maybe. But again, he got knocked out in the first round. What more do you want him to do? And it's not... I don't know if we don't just see the same result again. I feel like Alistair's chin has always been suspect. I think that, his chin gets tested, it fails. So I feel like Ngannou would probably just knock him out again, in all honesty. But maybe he doesn't. I don't know. I mean, Alistair's a warrior, and he's got a hell of a shot. So, I don't know. I also want to know what goes on with Khabib and Conor. Are they going to fight again? Is it going to be Conor and Nate? Is it going to be... I don't know. And I want to know. And it's a case where, you have these guys who are they're all big stars. Conor's a huge star, obviously. Khabib's a big star. And you wonder... Are you just going to throw them together again? But it's at the same time, it's like, okay, well, the fight was pretty dominant. You couldn't really have gotten much more dominant in that fight than Khabib did. So I feel like you give Conor someone like Dustin Poirier or I don't know. You give him Nate, the third Nate fight, that'd be cool. But then if he loses that fight, I mean, how could you possibly give him a title shot afterwards? So I feel like he would have to go back into fighting middle, like let's say middle card guys, if you will. But that wouldn't be good. I don't think he would ever do that. I think he would just keep, fielding offers for Floyd Mayweather and whatnot, and that would kind of be the end of that. So it's interesting, man. It's interesting what he's going to be up to. Because I think if you give him kind of just whatever fight he wants, I think he takes Khabib again. But I don't know. We'll see what happens. So that's going to be the show, you guys. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll be back sooner rather than later. Take care.